So good evening, everyone. My name is Marguerite Anglin, and I'm the Public Art Director for the City of Philadelphia. On behalf of the city's Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, I'd like to welcome you to this first public meeting to discuss Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman statue. The City of Philadelphia is excited to commission this permanent statue of American hero, abolitionist, social activist, and soldier Harriet Tubman to be located on the north apron of City Hall. Our goal is to have this statue installed by November of 2023, and it will reflect the essence of Harriet Tubman's story. It will speak to a diversity of audiences, and it will represent values of strength, courage, and resilience to inspire all who visit City Hall. Now, community input will be vital to the success of this historic public art project. So we're hosting this public input meeting because we want to hear from you. Tonight's meeting will provide an opportunity for you to hear background information about this project, to meet the artist Wesley Wofford, to share what Harriet Tubman means to you, and to provide your input on potential themes to help inform the design of this statue. Your input will also help the artist, Wesley Wofford, understand Philadelphia's aspirations for the Harriet Tubman statue, how you want this statue to make you feel, and how it can be relevant to Philadelphia today. Tonight, we look forward to discussing what is most important to you about Harriet Tubman and what stories this artwork should tell. During this time of discussion, there will also be an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you may have about this project. So we also have established an advisory committee comprised of members of Harriet Tubman's family, community representatives, historians, educators, and public art professionals to help us ensure that the statue reflects and connects to Philadelphia and that your feedback is incorporated in the design. Some of the members of the advisory committee are here with us in the audience this evening. This public meeting is being recorded and a link will be made available online, including a summary of this presentation. After this meeting, we invite you to participate in a formal public input survey that's going to be posted and will be made available online at creativephl.org. Excerpts of this presentation will also be aired on Arts Access TV, channel 64 on June 22nd and June 24th at 6 p.m. We want to make sure that we're encouraging as many members of the public as possible to participate in this upcoming Harriet Tubman public input survey. So before we get started, we're going to introduce the people that you'll be hearing from this evening. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, starting with Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kelly Lee. I am the Chief Cultural Officer for the City of Philadelphia and the Executive Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. And I just want to echo Marguerite's welcome and thank you all for logging on this evening.
Okay, and I'm again, Marguerite Anglin, Public Art Director for the City of Philadelphia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Stephanie Fuentes, and I'm the Assistant Public Art Director.
For joining us. My name is Tu Huynh, and I am the Program Manager for the office.
And hi, everyone. I'm Wesley Wofford. I'm a figurative sculptor, the sculptor who produced the piece, The Journey to Freedom, that came to the city in the winter. It's an honor to be here and speak with you all.
Okay, now Kelly will take us into the first activity of the evening.
Great. So as Marguerite said, your input is extremely important to us and to Wesley. And as part of this evening's agenda, the majority of the time that we have will be for discussion. And we also have several live poll questions for you to participate in. You will see the poll questions and the answers for you to select from pop up on your screen. And we want you to select your answer and then hit the submit button. And it's important to do that to hit submit for your response to be tallied. So I have two quick poll questions for you now that will help to frame the rest of this discussion. The first question is, Did you see the Harriet Tubman, the Journey to Freedom statue while it was installed on the north apron of City Hall from January 11th through the 31st? Yes, no, or not in person, but I saw it online or in the media. Great, don't forget to hit submit for your answer to be registered. Cool. So the results of the survey, it looks like the majority of the people, 60%, saw a journey to freedom, and that more people even saw it online, which is really, really great. And it's wonderful because it gives you some context for the conversation that we are about to embark on. So the second question that I have is, one of the roles of public art is to generate an emotional response. How should Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman statue make you feel or respond? Select a word you think that should best describe this feeling. Now we know it could be all of the above, so we want you to check the word, to select the word that best describes how it should make you respond. And again, don't forget to hit submit at the end. Great. It looks like it could be all of the above. It's we have sharing, empowered, inspired, and represented, but it is pretty evenly divided. So that's pretty exciting because we think that all of those words really represent Harriet Tubman and how the statue should make you feel.
Absolutely. And so this is our agenda for tonight. So we're first going to provide some background on Wesley Wofford's The Journey to Freedom statue. Next, we will provide a brief history of Harriet Tubman's life. And then we will discuss possible themes that could be used to inform the design of the statue. Now, this looks like a lot, but the majority of the time will be spent on discussion, which is the most important part. And we're going to, at that time when we have discussion, we'll give instructions for that. However, as a reminder, we're recording this so that the rest of the public can listen in. And this is one of the reasons why the chat feature is disabled, so that the verbal discussion can be recorded and made available to those that were not able to attend. Next slide, please. So we're here today because of the overwhelming impact of the temporary Harriet Tubman, The Journey to Freedom statue by artist Wesley Wofford, which was installed at City Hall from January the 11th to March the 31st, 2022, in celebration of Harriet Tubman's 200th birthday. This traveling statue represents Harriet Tubman's courageous journey to free enslaved people and beautifully illustrates her determination despite the intense opposition that she faced. The Journey to Freedom statue has visited cities in North Carolina, New Jersey, and New York, in addition to Philadelphia. And during the short time that it was installed at City Hall, there was a tremendous outpouring of love and pride for the Journey to Freedom statue. Close to 4 million people either visited the statue or shared their experiences on social media. As we can see, several of you, many of you today in the audience are part of that number. But close to 4 million people described how they felt this statue successfully captured Harriet Tubman's strength, spirit, courage, and likeness. And as a result of so many people wanting to keep Wesley Wofford's Journey to Freedom, Mayor Kinney offered to purchase it for the city of Philadelphia. And when the city learned that the Journey to Freedom could not be purchased, the city decided to commission the same artist, Wesley Wofford, to create a permanent version of this statue specifically for Philadelphia. Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman statue will be a continuation of the story told by the temporary Journey to Freedom statue. It will be funded by the city of Philadelphia and will become part of the city's permanent public art collection. And it will represent one of the city's first public artworks honoring a historic African-American female figure. And Philadelphia's Harriet Tubman statue will have many of the same qualities of the temporary Journey to Freedom statue that resonated so deeply with the public. However, it will tell a Philadelphia-focused story about Harriet. Now, most of us learned about Harriet Tubman when we were younger. So now my colleague, Tu Huynh, will remind everyone of some major highlights of her history before we discuss possible themes for the statue. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Tu.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Tu Huynh. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, I'm here to present an abbreviated timeline of Harriet Tubman's life, just touching on some of her key accomplishments and points in her life, with a general understanding that her more comprehensive history, for instance, with the Underground Railroad, Philadelphia's anti-slavery movement, and the Civil War would require much more time than we have here tonight. So with that, let's get started. Historians have established, and they've agreed, that she was born into slavery sometime in the month of March in 1822. Her mother was Rit Green, short for Harriet, and her father, Ben Ross. She was the fifth of 9 children. In 1844, she received the name Tubman through marriage, but kept her mother's name, Harriet, so she became known as Harriet Tubman. In 1849, she escaped and found freedom in Philadelphia, a city with a thriving free Black community and activists in the anti-slavery and suffragist movements. By this point, the state legislature had already abolished slavery, and Pennsylvania was indeed a free state. So in 1850 was when her journeys back to Maryland began. 1850 was also the time of the federal Fugitive Slave Act, which superseded state laws. Locals were now required to help capture fugitive enslaved Africans, even in a free state like Pennsylvania. Harriet Tubman was no longer free and was subject to capture, which made her sacrifices and bravery even more significant. Despite this adversity, she was determined to free her family and people from slavery. So for 6 years, she lived and traveled through Philadelphia and Cape May, New Jersey, working in hotels and clubhouses as a domestic to save money for her journeys. She frequented Underground Railroad stops, including being a regular visitor at the home of Philadelphian William Still, visiting the Johnson House in Germantown and speaking at Mother Bethel AME Church. She developed a reputation as a liberator and made friends with powerful reformers, including Lucretia Mott, a Quaker abolitionist and women's rights advocate. Through her, she met many activists, including Frederick Douglass. These relationships would play an important role in her activism throughout her life, as was the strength of her faith, her Methodist upbringing, which was a personal calling to serve others. So this is pretty fascinating. So in 1858, Harriet Tubman also worked with legendary abolitionist John Brown in the planning and fundraising for his historic raid on Harper's Ferry. Brown was the person who called her General. It's just absolutely amazing to me, incredible to me to think that she played a role in one of the seminal events that would eventually lead to the American Civil War. So in 1859, she moved her family and friends to Auburn, New York, and became a speaker and advocate at abolitionist and women's suffrage meetings. She also became a member of the AME Zion Church in New York, Mother Zion. In 1860, she underwent her final mission on the Underground Railroad. Over a period of 10 years, through approximately 13 trips, she assisted 60 to 70 people and provided detailed instruction to another 60 to 70 freedom seekers. This is an actual quote from Sarah Bradford's book, the first biography of Harriet Tubman. I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Next one. So in the spring of 1861, the Civil War erupts. And during the Civil War, she first served as a nurse and cook, who would play even some more heroic roles as a scout and spy for the Union Army. The summer of 1863 was a significant turning point in many respects for the war. In June, she became the first woman to lead an assault during the Civil War, guiding 3 steamboats of 150 Black Union soldiers around Confederate mines in the Combahee River raid in South Carolina. She helped liberate more than 700 enslaved people. In July of that year, she would become the chief nurse, tending to the wounds of the Black soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment after their battle at Fort Wagner. The events of the 54th Regiment would inspire more than 200,000 Black men to enlist and was depicted in the movie Glory. She was a witness to the historic battle and was there to tend to its aftermath. Her many war experiences, including as a soldier carrying a rifle, would affect her for the rest of her life. So the war ended. When the war ended, she returned to Auburn, where she began another career as a community activist, humanitarian, and suffragist. She made it her mission in life after the war to care for her family and to bring dignity and peace to the formerly enslaved, the elderly, the poor, and the Black veterans of the war. So 1896, another really important year, she spoke at the first meeting of the National Association for Colored Women and became a founding member, along with Mary Church Terrell, I.W. Wells, and Philadelphia's own Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. The motto for the NACW was "Lift as we climb," which aimed to uplift all African Americans during the Jim Crow era. Even though she was illiterate, she was highly intelligent and her speeches were in great demand. Working with other suffragists fighting for a woman's right to vote, like Susan B. Anthony, Tubman would give speeches in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. In 1903, she donated her property to the Amy Zion Church in Auburn, so it would be transformed into a home for the elderly. In her later years, she would eventually move into it and become a resident. Okay, so 1913, on March 10th, we know this date for sure. 1913, Harriet Tubman passed on. Recognized for her service during the war, she was buried with full military honors. The Amy Zion Church would become known as Freedom Church for many of the abolitionists that spoke there, such like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Her last words to her closest friends and family members who were there was, I go to prepare a place for you.
Great, thanks too. So based on that very abbreviated history that you just heard about Harriet Tubman, and also the impact of the Journey to Freedom that Marguerite shared, you know, there are many words that come to mind that could be associated with Harriet Tubman. She represents so many things to different people. So for our third poll question, I want to ask you to help us select which word you think best reflects Harriet Tubman. And make sure you scroll down because there are more words under leader. So activist, advocate, compassionate, courageous, determined, dignified, leader, strong, woman of faith. And again, please make sure that you hit submit. We want a couple more seconds, and please make sure you hit submit. Well, if so, it looks like, based on the selection, courageous was had the most responses with 27%, followed by activists at 19%. Again, all of these words are true, but courageous and activists, based on that brief history that we heard, certainly are two of the strongest words that that one would associate with Harriet Tubman.
So as the artist, Wesley's job is to take the words that are most important to Philadelphia in representing Harriet Tubman, and a theme that represents the story that you want this artwork to tell, and make it into a physical design. So as with the Journey to Freedom statue, Wesley was able to successfully capture the essence of a written theme or concept in physical form. So this is a great segue to discussing possible themes that could inform the design of Philadelphia's Harriet Tubman statue. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Wesley Wofford to talk about some of these possible themes, and also talk about his process of turning community input into a visual representation for a physical statue.
Hello, everyone. First off, thank you all for having me here. I think that this sort of process is integral to the entire process of finding the right composition and the right statue for Philadelphia. So yeah, it's absolutely necessary to hear from you all. So yeah, as far as how I work, essentially, I mean, I see myself sort of as a tool to be utilized. So I'm a figurative sculptor and kind of on a nationwide level. Lots of different groups hire me to produce sculptures for them. And it's really a matter of, as an artist, being an empty vessel that can receive messaging from various groups, and trying to take that message and form and forge it into a shape that resonates with certainly the local public, and hopefully the nationwide public in the world. And so, yeah, I mean, it really is a matter of a lot of listening on my part to absorb what people want to talk about. Talking about Harriet Tubman, listening to that history. She's such an incredible woman with so many facets that you could explore to celebrate and sculpturally. And so saying we want a Harriet Tubman statue narrows the focus a little bit, but then there's a lot of directions that can go based on her history, based on her local history with Philadelphia, based on the icon that she became 200 years later. So yeah, hopefully we can have a constructive conversation tonight about you know, what voice do you all want this statue to have for your city? And to sort of facilitate that, working off of the social media responses from when the Journey to Freedom was there in the winter, and all of the celebration and events that the city of Philadelphia hosted. There was a lot of feedback from the public about that statue and how it related to Philadelphia, and things that were important and things that were not. So really just to kind of help us focus and give us a launch pad. We all work together, taking all that into account to kind of outline 3 themes to perhaps discuss tonight. And really, I mean, these 3 themes are, think of them as a launch pad. It's just to start a dialogue, because oftentimes when working with a group, it's difficult to get that dialogue going. So we're hoping to elicit some thoughts, hopefully generate a lot of new thoughts that will then in turn create new themes and new concepts, building concepts in my head about what the statue could be. So we're going to throw those up on the screen, and I'm going to just read them. And I'm very much not a teleprompt person, so if it's a little awkward, I apologize. So the first theme is lifting as we climb, which came up in the history lesson that we got. This theme is inspired by Harriet Tubman's story of being a Black woman who lifted and helped others throughout her life. It is a celebration of the power of Black women who uplift their families, communities, and cities every day. The phrase, "lift as we climb," was the motto of the National Association of Colored Women, started in 1896. Harriet Tubman was a founding member and spoke at the inaugural meeting in Washington, D.C. So that's the first sort of launchpad concept of conversation. We'll go on to the second one. The second one is lessons from Harriet. This theme highlights lessons from Harriet Tubman's story that are relevant and impactful to our lives today. Her sacrifice as she put herself in danger to save others, her service as a liberator of the enslaved and a soldier and nurse in the Civil War, and her activism against slavery and fighting for the right to vote are all lessons that should motivate and inspire us to be the Harriet Tubman of our time. And this specific theme, we danced around how to title that, and another one was Voices of Our Ancestors. There's lots of other kind of concepts behind this one, but that's number 2. And then number 3 is overcoming adversity. Harriet Tubman was Black, born into slavery, a woman, illiterate, and had a head trauma that caused a lifelong debilitating headaches. Yet she overcame all of these adversities to impact history. This theme would use Harriet Tubman as an inspiration for how we can overcome the obstacles facing our communities today, such as racial injustice, gun violence, and lack of quality education. That theme was another sort of launch pad, and all of these themes, I don't think of them as one thing, think of them as kind of an overlaying of perhaps, there's ways to incorporate different aspects of perhaps 2 of these themes or incorporate some new ones. So anyway, that's just to kind of kick the conversation off. And hopefully you all have a lot to say, and I'm just going to sit here and listen. And I can also answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thanks, Wesley. So we have just a few poll questions about these 3 themes. And then we're here until 7:30. The rest of the time, we're going to open it up for your questions, your comments. It could be variations on these themes. It could be new themes. It could be on the history. We just want to hear from you. We're going to use the raise your hand feature, and Stephanie's going to unmute people and so that you can ask your question or make your comment. But before we go into the open discussion, again, we have a few poll questions about the 3 themes that Wesley just reviewed. So question number 4 on the themes is that Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman statue needs to speak to and engage all people, all ages, all races, all gender identities, etc. Which theme best speaks to a diversity of audiences? So just to remind you of the 3. This is so exciting to watch the numbers move as people hit submit. Great, please make sure you hit submit. We have 42 people registered, so we want to see more responses. This is great. Great. It looks like Lift as We Climb is the theme that you all feel speaks to a broader, more diverse range of people, ages, genders, etc. And this permanent statue, we want to reach as many people as possible. So that's really great. So our next poll is, which theme best reflects the essence of Harriet Tubman's story? Just from what you know, from what you've heard earlier, which theme best reflects the essence of Harriet Tubman's story? Well, it looks like everyone feels that all three at least does reflect the essence of Harriet Tubman's story, with with a few more people selecting the overcoming adversity theme. But I'm glad that like all three themes, really do, for the most part, touch on the story of Harriet Tubman. Great. And for our next poll question, which theme is most relevant to Philadelphia today? Which theme is most relevant to Philadelphia today? Great, and it looks like, again, the overcoming adversity is the theme that people feel are most relevant to Philadelphia today. We see a hand clap going up on the screen, which is always good. But all three themes, are relevant, but it's clear that overcoming adversity is, people feel, is a little bit more relevant. So this is our final poll question about the three themes that you heard. Which theme will best stand the test of time, 10, 20, or 50 years from now? Interesting. The lessons from Harriet is the theme that the majority of people feel will stand the best of time 10, 20, or 50 years from now. Great. Thank you. That was really very helpful. So we're going to open this up to discussion. Again, please use the raise your hand feature. We have a lot of time, so hopefully we will be able to get to all questions and comments. Everything and anything is on the table. Again, the themes you heard, variations on the themes, questions about the themes, question about Wesley, questions about this process. And with that, Stephanie, do you want to call on, we have 4 participants with hands raised.
Yep. Go ahead, Elliot, with your first question or comment. Oh, you're muted. You just muted yourself. Elliot, we'll come back to you. How about Lisa? You can unmute yourself, Lisa, and then feel free to share your comment or question.
Yes, hi, my name's Lisa, and I'm here representing Disability Education Advocacy Network. And I'd like to share with you an article in pieces that was written by our friends at Rooted in Rights by Olivia Harden. She graduated out of Southern California from Chapman University and had a bachelor's in journalism. And she uses
Lisa, before you start, can you just lean in a little bit closer to your computer or your microphone? We can hear you, but I want to make sure that everyone can hear you clearly.
Okay, is that better?
That is much better, thank you.
Okay, as I was saying, the article I wanted to point out was written by Olivia Harding, and she uses her experience as a Black queer woman to guide her storytelling, as well as bringing attention to voices that are not often heard. And in the article, she states that, of course, Harriet Tubman was a hero, but one key point that is often left out in her narrative is that she was a disabled person. She suffered a head injury, which causes seizures. And that is a very important narrative, I think, to Philadelphia, because we have a large population of disabled people. And also students are not learning that very important, empowering point about Harriet in their lessons or books. They learn about Harriet Tubman, but they do not know that she had a disability. And I hope that you would consider incorporating that important part of her story, either in the imagery or even if it's in a written form on a plaque connected with the statue. Thank you so much for hearing me, and congratulations on this great work.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Stephanie, you're muted.
We'll try again with Elliot.
Elliot, you're unmuted on our end. You just have to unmute yourself on your end.
Okay. Elliot, we'll try again after our next speaker. So I'm going to let's have Leslie. Go ahead, Leslie.
Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Hi, Leslie, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I understand, you know, that we're working to overcome diversity, but I am not in support of this particular artist other than the fact that he's not African American. I feel as though this should have been brought to the community and we should have been, you know, made aware or been able to select an artist, an African American sculpture artists out there that do really good work. And
Leslie,
yes,
you broke up a little bit. Can you just sort of repeat your last two sentences so that we don't miss anything?
yes, I feel as though that an African American art sculpturist, if I'm saying it right, should have been selected to do this particular piece for Harriet Tubman. I do understand that we're trying to overcome diversity, but there were a lot of there's a lot of them out there that could have done that. And because she's African American, I think that's what we should have chosen to do that. So I'm not in support of this artist doing the work. Nothing personal against him, but just the fact that I think it should be African American doing this work.
Leslie, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's a comment that, you know, we met with a group of concerned advocates for Harriet Tubman who had the same concern. And so thank you for, you know, for expressing it in this public forum.
Okay.
Marguerite, no, we totally appreciate it. Marguerite, do you want to address it? And Wesley, if you have anything to add, that would be great too. Marguerite.
Certainly, and Leslie, thank you as well for that question. It's a very good question. And then, you know, the city of Philadelphia understands that you know, there's an underrepresentation of Black artists and African American artists telling and Black stories that are being told in our public art. And the city is working, and we're working to ensure that artists that are hired for our public art projects represent the diversity of our communities. As you'll see in most of our typical process, the city is starting from the beginning with a new public art project. Our office, OACCE, would send out normally a call for artists. We cast a wide net, and we would give priority. And it's listed in the call for artists typically that we give priority to artists that reflect the diversity of the communities where the art is being installed. And we would encourage all minority artists to apply. However, this is a unique situation where we're not starting from the beginning. This is a situation where the temporary Journey to Freedom sculpture inspired the permanent statue that we're talking about now. And for all intents and purposes, if the city were able to, because of the outpouring of love and because of the response and the pride and the impact that the temporary statue had on the city, we tried to purchase it. The city of Philadelphia tried to purchase it, but due to legal you know, restrictions and copyright issues, we weren't able to purchase it. And so we're doing the next best thing in commissioning that same artist to provide a version of this sculpture that is specifically for Philadelphia. And you know, again, as Kelly mentioned, we had talked with another group about this, and we understand that this is a point of concern, but you know, right or wrong, you know, we feel like it would be inappropriate for us to hire another artist, hire a Black artist or a different artist to recreate the expression of another artist. And so that's what's happening here. This is a unique situation. I hope that answers your question.
Well, and listen, we're not sure, you know, that's our response. You know, we hope that you know, that you will change your mind and be supportive of this project. But, you know, we understand, you know, your point of view. Wesley, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I would have a little bit to say. Leslie, I hear you. I think it's very important that, I mean, there's underrepresented groups in our public squares nationwide that needs to be addressed. There needs to be a course correction in our public squares. If you look at a breakdown of public sculpture in America, it's predominantly of white men, specifically military white men. And so we have seen sort of a reassessment of that in the last couple of years. And I think that you're exactly right. Hiring artists of color is just as important as representing the underrepresented groups in our public squares. And I absolutely think that in open calls and things, they should get preference. Groups that are underrepresented creators should get preference over white artists, and specifically white artists, white male artists. That is obviously the elephant in the room, me being here. It's incredibly important. I also think that the task ahead of us is so large that every sculptor needs to be focused on this important work of re-leveling the playing field in our public spaces in America. You know, I don't want to limit it, much like the Underground Railroad was a biracial endeavor. I think that these endeavors, like we all need to be working on it. But I hear you. I think what you're saying is very important. You know, I hope that perhaps I can win you over through this process, but I understand your comment and your voice. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Elliot, we're going to try again. See if you're able, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, we'll try again later, Elliot. Just we'll have you raise your hand again. Let's go with Jacqueline. Jacqueline Wiggins, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My question is to Mr. Wofford and to Ms. Lee, Ms. Anglin, and to the rest of the staff, and to the mayor as well. With respect to Ms. Leslie's comment, I'm saying the same thing. I'm glad that she brought it up because now I can add a few more pieces to it. Ms. Anglin, you mentioned temporary to the permanent, and it seems as though what you designed initially, I had an appreciation for it. I saw it. I thought it was well done, but it seems as though this is a second opportunity, and this opportunity is not being granted to a width and breadth in terms of other artists, especially African-American artists. Black folks make up about 42% of the population here in the city of Philadelphia. And I would think that if we're going to say that some numbers are underrepresented, we have a host of people who I think it would have been gracious and thoughtful and perhaps the right thing to do to actually have some of these folks be in competition. I don't know if there was any competition at all. I just know that from what I read that Mr. Wofford, Wesley, that you were selected. And I guess I'm having some problems with that. I really do mean that sincerely. It just seems, unfair in terms of a second opportunity. And I think, Ms. Anglin, you just mentioned that it would be unfair to have another artist, I guess, either capitalize or work from another artist's work. Well, wouldn't another artist have his or her own view and perspective based on what the community is looking for? And just one more thing, throughout some of the presentation, there are two little points here. Mr. Wofford, I think you mentioned the Underground Railroad was biracial. Yeah, to an extent it was biracial, but the Underground Railroad was first and foremost Black folks helping Black folks. That's the undertold part of that story, okay? And you can read that in Dr. Cheryl LaRoche's book, Mr. Blockson's book, and other texts as well. And the other piece is giving standard language, standard dialect, if you will, the standard form to Mrs. Tubman when she spoke in dialect. That quote, in standard, I never run my train off the track, she is to have said, I never run my train off the track and I never lost a passenger. And I really think we need to be authentic with respect to what she said. This other quote that's used sometimes, I would have freed more slaves if they only knew they were. I even question, sometimes that just doesn't make sense to me. But on the other hand, I think we need to be authentic with respect to how she spoke and what she meant when she did. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
And I would like to touch on that. I completely agree with you. I think authenticity is incredibly important. So often you see, even with Harriet Tubman's story, if you look at some of the movie that came out, there were so many things that weren't accurate historically, and I didn't even understand why they were incorporated. Because her story is amazing, told as is, accurately, historically. So I didn't really see the need to embellish or invent things there. But I do find that authenticity is incredibly important. And, I don't tell my white male story. Like, I don't think I've ever been hired to tell my white male story. Frankly, it's not all that interesting. but I am very, not only interested, but I think my skill set lies in working with communities to tell their stories. And some of the sculptures behind me, we're working with the Cherokee Nation right now to tell the story of this Cherokee princess named Rebecca. This woman behind me is Sally. These are historic women that we are working with historians and community members to tell their stories. So yes, it's never about me. And a poet talked about when does he know a poem is done? Someone had asked him when he knew a poem was done. And he said that I know it's complete when I cannot see myself in it. And I very much feel that way. Like I'm irrelevant to the final composition. The thing that will be there has the voice, not me. But I hear you.
I just also want to add one piece of information, because you mentioned the quote from Harriet Tubman. That quote, I mean, this is a large issue as well as far as interpreting history, and Wesley's doing it through art, which is difficult enough to translate from. But that quote came from Sarah Bradford, and she was the only biographer to have sat across from Harriet Tubman to interview her for her biography. She was the only one. So most historians who go back in time to research Harriet Tubman, they would probably start with Sarah Bradford's account. So even when she was sitting across the table from Harriet Tubman, writing this history down back in 1869, even before then, to get that, she had an issue of authenticity as well. So that's always going to be a challenge. And that's why this type of conversation that we're having is so vitally important. I do want to say one thing, and I don't mean any disrespect to Wesley or any artist for that matter, but this sculpture is so important that once it's done, Wesley's name might not be remembered. You know, this is a historical figure, historical statue. And the things that people will see first and foremost is that person, that subject. They will remember Harriet Tubman. And maybe some of them will look at the plaque and recognize Wesley Wofford's name. So this conversation that we're having, it's a public art conversation, right, for a piece. And public artists don't work in a bubble. They require your input. So this engagement is so highly important. And as much as I like Wesley, I challenge you, hopefully I'll meet you 20 years down the road and we'll ask somebody off the street if they know who Wesley Wofford is. We'll stand right in front of his statue. We'll ask people who this person is, because the more important person is Harriet Tubman. And that process involves all of us, not just Wesley.
Thank you too. And just really quickly to wrap this up, Jacqueline, I just want you to know that we hear you and we honor your and what are probably other people's concerns as well. And I wanted to address what you mentioned about recreating the expression of another artist, in case that wasn't clear, was that, the whole reason why we're here and the reason why the city decided to commission a sculpture of Harriet Tubman by Wesley Wofford was because because of the outpouring of love that we received for his Journey to Freedom sculpture. And we truly initially just wanted to purchase that for the city. And that would have been great. And, we weren't expecting how much, the tremendous response that we got. I mean, it was very emotional, the response we got. And we can speculate on all the reasons why. I think we know that there's the underrepresentation, obviously, of Black females, Black women, especially women who have contributed to Philadelphia and to our history, represented in public art, certainly in Philadelphia and in many cities. So we can understand that people were just, emotional in terms of wanting to see that and excited to see the Journey to Freedom statue. But there also were very specific responses that people got from, this statue, the fierceness of it, the likeness, just the way that it was able to represent her courage and her determination. It's uncanny. And some people thought that it was done by a Black woman, just because of how sensitive, clearly, the artist was, Wesley was, toward listening and trying to represent and tell this story. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that was the genesis and that was the reason why the city decided to commission the sculpture, is that we thought it would be inappropriate to bring in another artist to say, hey, we want Philadelphia's version of this specific sculpture that elicited this emotional response and was this impactful. Now make it like that, and that's what it would have been, because we want this sculpture to be just as impactful, and we want to have the same emotional response as we did with the Journey to Freedom. So I hope that was my long-winded, way of answering that part of your question. But thank you again.
Go ahead, Betty, with your question.
Okay, first I have a comment, then I have a question. I think no matter where we are in life, at one time or another, we can use a hand up to overcome diversity and to feel empowered to learn more about lessons from Harriet Tubman. And these lessons hopefully will help people relate to our present day circumstances. That's kind of what I got from some of the things that you were saying, because I think it's really important for people to go back and look at, these are some of the same situations. How did she solve that problem? Now we can learn from her and solve our own problems. My question is, how can these things be represented to engage people in Philadelphia? Because that's what I want to see. I want to see people engaged. I'm an artist. I'm not like an artist like you, Ms. Wesley, but I focus more on writing. I can draw, but I cannot do sculpture.
Yeah, thanks, Betty. That's a really good question. And I'll take the first stab at answering that. Is that, this meeting is the first of several public engagement sessions we're going to have around the creation of this permanent Harriet Tubman statue. So these conversations is just trying to sort of, narrow down what the theme, what is the message that we want Philadelphia's Harriet Tubman statue to say. There will be others when people will be able to sort of see and give input as Wesley starts to move along in his actual creative process. But that aside, we did, when we were celebrating Harriet Tubman's 200th birthday between January and March, we coordinated more than 52 events to celebrate Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that we want to do is to keep that engagement going, because the more people learn about Harriet Tubman, and like you said, all of these messages and all of these things that she stands for are issues that we are grappling with today. She is a model for how we should be approaching problems today. We're going to be doing ongoing programming, just celebrating Harriet Tubman between now leading up to the unveiling of the permanent statue in November of 2023, to your point, to keep people engaged, not only in the development of the permanent statue, but in Harriet Tubman herself, just because there's so much we can continue to learn from her. And if anyone else wants to add, Marguerite or even Carrie, about the public process.
Yeah, no, and also, so today, as Kelly mentioned, is an input meeting, but there's going to be additional opportunities once Wesley has had an opportunity to kind of digest what the themes and well, let me stop by saying, after today, we're going to be telling you about a poll that we're going to be doing. So that's going to be an official poll. It's going to cast a wider net, and we're going to be incorporating some of these questions that we asked this group into that survey. So we're going to get that'll be open to everyone to do. And so from that, once a theme is selected, then Wesley will start his process of developing that into visual representation. And so some of those meetings that Kelly talked about, where we're going to be coming back to engage the public, will include, visual examples of what Philadelphia's statue is going to look like, and you'll have opportunity to provide feedback at that time as well.
And then just to kind of talk artist to artist about that same thing, and how like feedback and listening is a huge part of my work processes. Sculpturally, there's lots of ways to incorporate those types of elements that you touched on, like how do you convey, like some of these word cloud surveys that are going out. It's so oftentimes it's so much about how you feel when you encounter an object, and sculpture tends to have a very loud voice in the world. And so incorporating those narrative devices within a sculpture, and I guess as an example, leading back to the initial comment, Lisa, you were talking about Harriet getting hit by that counterweight. So we visited the Bucktown General Store in Dorchester County, Maryland, where that event happened. And that to flesh that story out, there was Tubman was an adolescent. At the time, her name was Araminta, but she was in the store picking something up, and a slave owner was chasing another slave through the store, and the slave ran around Araminta, and he picked up a counterweight off of the counter and tried to hit the slave, and he missed, and he hit Harriet in the head, or Minty, and crushed her skull, and he did disable her. And she talked about how she felt that that's when she became Harriet Tubman, she talked about that story in giving her visions and kind of changing her life, and how she saw the world, and how empowering that disability. Essentially, she took a disability that would cause her to fall asleep as she was on Underground Railroad raids in the woods. And she took that disability and flipped the script to turn it into an empowering moment. And actually, we're doing a statue for the Dorchester County Courthouse, and we've incorporated that little weight into that story. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it is an important thing that needs to be told. And hope, I think that's one example of a device you can use to talk about something. That one specifically is like historically specific, but then you can use broader terms like the Journey to Freedom statue, which is here. There was a conversation about slave state versus free state, and so this cliff represented. Harriet talked about crossing that Pennsylvania state line, and how she was free, like this imaginary line in the woods, and the relief of crossing that threshold. And so there was a metaphor built into that piece. And then there's also little details that the child's foot overhanging a cliff gives a sense of peril. The hands and what the hands represent. And Vincent Leggett talked about this was, how did he describe it? Something about the talking about a tiger grabbing onto the side of a raft when it's drowning, like, that sort of like squeeze of survival. And so I think that there are lots of ways to have those conversations, either with direct historical, narrative devices, or larger metaphorical kind of concepts.
Thank you, Wesley. Sorry if I'm not saying your name. Ogundipe.
Ogundipe Fayomi.
Go ahead with your comment or question.
Yes, it pertains to how this process was done, how the artist was chosen. Some of the questions have been answered already, but I just want to know is, was public funds being used for the payment, either through state or federal funds?
To commission the permanent statue, yes, it's all public dollars, all city dollars will be used to pay for the permanent Harriet Tubman statue.
Okay, from my understanding, since I've done public art here in New York, anytime public funds is used, there has to be an open call for the artist. Otherwise, it's a problem. It's a problem with the law because it comes out of the Percent for Art program, right?
No, this is not a Percent for Art project. It's a public art project, but not Percent for Art. And in Philadelphia, our office, we do have the ability to commission a specific artist to do a specific piece. As Marguerite explained, typically in all of our Percent for Art projects, there is an open call, but this project was not that. It was a continuation of that. But we are legally allowed to hire Wesley directly. And we are even able to do that for our Percent process, but we do an open call just because we want to cast a wide net and we want to make sure that there's representation in our artist pool that reflects Philadelphia.
All right, I appreciate that answer. In reference to African Americans doing African American pieces, I think it's very important that that process happens, because what happens is that when a sculptor is up there on that ladder, either carving or doing the clay work, it is very important for us as Black people to see that process take place, especially amongst the young people, to inspire them to do those kinds of processes, to be sculptors, to be monument makers. Because when we have other people doing that, it doesn't show us being able to do those processes, that we can't do that kind of stuff. So it's very important, whether it's the monument in Washington where MLK was done by the Chinese, or all the other sculptures that are being done across the nation now by white sculptors of African Americans. There is a problem, there's a fundamental problem there when those activities take place, because it undermines our vision, our hope and desires, creativity. I mean, I can go on in that vein, because we in this country of people of color, we're still under attack. Whether you want to agree with that or not, we are still under attack, and we have to be able to show our value, our creativity, and that we can do things rather than other people doing things for us.
Thank you. I mean, you are definitely echoing the sentiment that we've heard from other people, and look, you are not wrong, and we do not disagree. It's really important, especially for younger people, to see Black public artists doing this work in order for them to be aware that that is an option for them. And again, typically, I think last year for our public art projects, like 59% of the artists that we hired were, artists of color, and through our open call process. But this was not that process. But again, I'm not disagreeing with you. And again, I think we all on this call, agree with you.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
And I would love to touch on that. I think that you're absolutely right. If you talk about, like if you listen to like Confederate statues being pulled down around the country, and like the effect those statues have specifically on Black children in America, and I have I've had multiple discussions with with artists kind of across the country about the need for statues that Black children can look at and see themselves in, and the fact that those statues don't really exist. One of the other speakers was talking about, why would a Black child ever aspire to be a sculptor if the only sculpture that they're ever introduced to is of, Robert E. Lee or a white man on a horse or something like that. So I think that touches on the importance of the lack of, increasing the diversity in our public spaces of the imagery as well as the creators. I think you're dead on. It's very important, and you want those children to see themselves in statues and then aspire to, yes, I want to be that. I want to build things like this. It's incredibly important.
Thanks, Wesley. Go ahead, Karen.
Good evening and thank you. I have to say first, I was part of the outpouring of love. I loved the statue from the minute I saw her, and I had the privilege of seeing her often. One of the things I do is I'm a tour guide for City Hall. So I was able to see her all the time, and not only to see her personally, but I got to speak of her and to her and of your work, Wesley. And every time it was more and more moving. And I was so very grateful she was there. And the day that I read that she was going to be, we were going to have our own, and not only were we going to have our own Harriet Tubman sculpture, but she was going to be right there on the apron of City Hall. To be admired and appreciated, and to be able to share her marvelous determination and ferocity. And your work is just, I thought you just captured her. I mean, it doesn't matter what color you are, you just got it. And I looked at her and I studied her and I've watched the reactions, and I could not be more proud of Philadelphia than that we're commissioning a permanent monument for her. And I thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead, Dee, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I did. Okay, good afternoon. There's a lot going on with me emotionally right now. What I'm blanking on her name, Marguerite said, is laughable and funny and sad. Really. I understand, Wesley, all due respect, your work is great. It's not about you personally, but it's more about the process. The process, unlike Harriet Tubman, was not equitable. This is what we fought for. This is what she fought for. And the process didn't happen, in the city. I think as an educator, okay, it does matter who the artist is. You spoke about children, Wesley, not having these images. It's not just the image itself, it's who does the image. A lot of things are mass produced in this country that might have images that look like different people, but are not always produced by these people. So the benefit can't be sectioned off. Image is great, but who did it? And as Ms. Wiggins, who's a historian, that historical accuracy and authenticity is extremely, extremely important. Now, I realize, Kelly, Marguerite, your mind is made up. You're not going to change. But for the record, as an artist, it's hurtful, and it is traumatizing. If it was an open call and Wesley was chosen, that would be fine. The fact that he did a piece that was great, okay, I get it. You couldn't buy it, have an open call, perhaps, if he was selected that way, that would have been okay. But because the process wasn't open, that's the big issue, okay? Wesley, I'm listening to you and you agree that Black folks, people of color aren't represented. How are you going to correct that? What are you going to do specifically with this particular project? How can you make that right? How can you take your words and saying that you understand the importance of a Black artist or artist of color doing work that represents them, how can you correct that wrong? In this particular instance? If your words mean something.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how to correct that wrong. I mean, the answer is, you know, I don't have a good answer for you that would like satisfy that. I think that it's a problem. I think that the lack of cultural diversity in our public spaces is a problem. I think that I was built to do this, like this is a skill set that I have. And producing these things is how I help. You know, I'm not a city or a commissioner of things, like I'm an artist out working in the world. And specifically that journey to freedom, peace that traveled to Philadelphia kind of changed what I feel is important to focus on with my skill set. You know, when we built that traveling program, it was really just to elevate underrepresented voices and that traveling piece that came to Philadelphia. I mean, I look at the programming that Philadelphia specifically did. It was 3 months of programming that was built around the statue. It wasn't built around me. I don't show up. That statue has been in 10 cities. And I think there's 12 more cities afterwards. And we, like, it's not us. It's the activists who want to bring it there, who want to have a conversation about the importance of objects that look like this in our space. I mean, that's the only way I know how to help. I am not a person with power to make overarching changes like you're suggesting with a swoop of my hand. I think that it's a huge problem in this country, and we all need to contribute in the way that we're equipped to contribute. The way that I'm equipped is to make these hands can push mud into a shape that resonates with people, and it resonates with people of every color. The only time I appeared to any event of that, again, that traveling Harriet Tubman. So, I mean, I would say that specific traveling piece has probably generated maybe 250 like individual events celebrating Black history in different cities all over the country. I think that that's a huge contribution to the fight, but it's also a very small contribution on the overall picture. But I mean, that's the only way I know how to help. The only way I know how to contribute.
I think you missed the question. The question specifically was, if you think or agree with your words, not verbatim, that there should be equity in terms of Black artists or other artists, what could you do? I mean, courageously, what could you do? And you might have to sit with that. You might have to be with that. Because as an artist too, you know, I'm gifted, other artists are gifted, you know, but just sit with that and think, if your words really mean this and you really, really believe this, what would be the right thing? And I'm just going to say to the people who made the selection, you know, hopefully with your conscience, you can sit with your decision and the process that you went through. Okay. And I'm complete.
Yeah. Dee, you know, again, thank you for for, sharing those words. I think that with our office, we're the only thing that we can say, and we have proven it, is that we are committed to working with artists of color. And like this project, which is so historically important, which we understand, and just the subject matter itself. If Wesley was a Black man or woman, it would be icing on the cake. But he is who he is, and it was our choice because we wanted to give Philadelphians what they were asking for. But as we understand that you are an artist, we are going to create many opportunities for public art in order to provide Black artists in Philadelphia. And that's our commitment, not just artists of color, but artists of color in Philadelphia, to be in our public spaces, whether or not it's for a temporary public art project or a permanent one moving forward. And we hear the sincerity in your voice, and we heard it from others. But that's all, right now, that's all we can do.
Well, it's a choice, but you live with it.
We're gonna let Maisha Sullivan, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Maisha.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And this process is really something. It builds on to what already has been a very piss poor process. So this process itself, with this dialogue in itself, is questionable. But I'm part of the committee celebrating the legacy of Nina Harriet Tubman. It's the group that they referred to, that we met with them with Kelly and the others some time ago, raising these concerns. And we're concerned about the process. We're very concerned about it. And I was just thinking about Nina Harriet and how she risked life and limb to be free, so that no one white would benefit off of her person anymore, her personage. And she just went to great stake to be able to own her energy, her ability to live and free. And this is what it feels like to me, that even now, someone white's benefiting off of her. And I admire his work. I'm an artist myself. I do public works art. But I'm just thinking about what Nina Harriet stood for herself, why she freed herself, because white people were benefiting off of her. And it's continuing now. And I know the statue had a lot of emotions in people, but I know a lot of artists who can generate that same level of emotion. And that's what artists do. You give them the feedback like you're attempting to do in this process. A good artist he doesn't have a monopoly on being able to capture what people want to feel and feel about Nina Harriet, because everyone feels her deeply. That's how important she is with us. And just the fact that people outside of her community can still benefit off of her legacy now. It just, it doesn't speak to us as a people in terms of our self-determination, that our art is we're supposed to define, speak for ourselves. One of the principles of Kwanzaa, self-determination. And this process is not lending itself to that. And you got a great artist, the one who did the Oviedo statue, who's a great African-American artist. There's other great artists in the country, just an open process. And Wesley still win, competing with everyone on an equal playing field. I ain't got no problem with it. But to just be given it because of one statue that everyone loved, you loved it because you didn't have compared to what? So people would see some of the other ones that's been done. There's other Harriet Tubman statues around the country, just as beautiful, just as emoting. But with that one there, that's because you saw it. But if it's standing next to one done by Vinnie Bagwell or one done by Brother Udupe, who was on here, you would feel the same kind of energy. And I have to disagree with my good friend too, when he was saying people are not going to remember who the artist is years to come. That's on us as we tell this narrative. You know, if we tell, one of the plus would be this beautiful statue of Harriet Tubman was made by a Black person, a person of color. That's the built-in narrative to the artwork. Then you will always know. Then you list who that artist is. You list what school they went to and what other works they did. Then that you would know who the artist is if it's built into the narrative that's told about the statue. And we believe it's very important who the makers are. The makers are, because if not, is what we're suffering from now, deficient modeling. We don't see enough of ourselves doing this work, that we're just as capable, just as gifted. So, you know, you got a great process going with the Marian Anderson statue that you commissioned, a great open call process. We just want to know why this one can't be that. You know, that's all we're asking for. Why can't we have an open call? We feel cheated that we can't get a chance to see what other artists could offer up for us. We're just locked into this what we've seen already. And we know there's a possibility of endless, the potentials of others are also just as great. And I'm really upset that I don't get the opportunity to see that, to see what others would come up with us with a process.
Right. Thanks, Maisha. And Maisha is one of the people that we met with before and raised the issue of not having an open call, which we sort of responded to. But again, it's always good to share all of these comments, you know, publicly. We can't. Our answer is still the same that we sent to you in writing, and that Marguerite sort of explained before about this not being a typical process where we would do an open call, and that hasn't changed. And we understand that we have disappointed public artists in Philadelphia and a lot of talented public artists, and we just hope to work with you all again in the future.
Go ahead, Ken, with your question or comment.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Johnston. First, I'd like to say to Wesley, it's really an honor to hear you talk about your statue. I think it was very beautiful. I visited the statue at night. I wanted to see it as Harriet would have seen Philadelphia, arriving at night, and that was important for me. I am a walking artist, and I've walked from Cambridge all the way to New York, visiting every Harriet Tubman statue between here and Harlem, in Wilmington, in Bristol, and in Harlem as well. And they're all beautiful. I think that your statue, if it was placed at the Harriet Tubman Visitor Center, it would fit perfectly outside their visitor center. Here in Philadelphia, I'm not sure. There are a lot of statues it would have to compete with in Philadelphia. One, the Rocky statue. There's so many people that go to see that. And Harriet Tubman is a larger than life figure. And I think that as your statue is presented right now, it's not that larger than life figure. If you put your statue on the mall in Washington, D.C., and it was Martin Luther King, it would not have the same dramatic impact that the Martin Luther King statue has there, or monument. We have to get this right here in Philadelphia. Absolutely. I understand this is a commission, but it has to be right. When you look at just the 3 statues that are around us, when you look at Mario Chiato's statue in Wilmington with Harriet Tubman and Thomas Garrett, that's a magnificent statue. We have to do something. We have to even elevate it higher, you know? It could be Harriet Tubman and William Still together here. There's many different options that this statue can be, but it has to be elevated more than the statues that are either in Wilmington or Bristol or even in Harlem. If it sits on the City Hall apron, that's the wrong location. Where it was before, it was in the shadow, even though it was kind of sort of facing North Broad Street. It was still in the shadow, and it was pointing west. It needs to be something that, you know, sits up. When you look at the statues on the Parkway, Joan of Arc, and some of the others, it needs to have that kind of larger than life look. She's going to be on our $20 bill. You know, we can't have a small Harriet Tubman. We just can't. The process needs to be open. There needs to be, I know you say there can't be a call, but if that's what the city is going to put forward, then that's what the city puts forward. The community can still build their own statue. It doesn't have to be limited to just what the government, city government offers. It may take us longer time, but we could do that. I've seen that in Montgomery with historical signs, where there is the state historical sign, and then there's the justice. I forgot his name. The justice signs, and they're very different. And you know, we just can't miss this. You know, this was, there is so many people that traveled to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was, through the Delaware River, was an avenue of freedom. And she represents the pinnacle of all those who traveled here seeking freedom. And there were many different cultures and groups that sought freedom. And many of the trails that she followed between Maryland and Philadelphia were on old indigenous trails. So there's that culture that could also be wrapped into this, because that was another avenue of freedom, and she knew about that. The elements of water also, I think, are important in this statue. It's important in the history of Black American freedom. It's written in all our songs and texts about, you know, water, and so that's something that I hope is incorporated in the next Harriet Tubman, but it just needs to be larger than what is being proposed right now, and I don't see it coming through this process. I'm sorry, but I love your work, and I saw your statue in Dorchester also. And I thought or Cambridge, I'm sorry, but I thought it was beautiful there next to the courthouse.
Well, Wesley, do you want to speak a little bit to just initial conversations about the size of the permanent one, and you know, just it also standing toe to toe with some of the other larger statues that are on the apron of City Hall?
Yeah. Ken, there's lots of great stuff there, and I agree with you pretty much with everything. That Kyoto statue in Wellington is impressive. It's a cool piece. I love the Harlem piece. Those are two very different flavors. When the Journey to Freedom got to Philadelphia, the first thing I thought was, yeah, this statue is too small for this space. And it is. That City Hall apron, all of the statues around it are 9-footers. And that, I think the Tubman height on that Journey to Freedom was, I think it's a 7-foot figure. So she was dwarfed by City Hall, the grandeur of that, and the space itself. So that was not the appropriate statue. It did its job, like it elicited conversations and gave kind of a focal point for a lot of programming and celebrations to talk about Harriet Tubman during her 200th anniversary of her birth. But yeah, it's a traveling piece. It's actually a byproduct of a commission that just resonated with the public to a point that we decided to put together that traveling version to have these very important conversations and uncomfortable conversations. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's so many ways just the history of Harriet Tubman in Philadelphia. Like there's very specific milestones of things that happened in Philadelphia with Harriet Tubman, and perhaps those are a focus. If you look at her bringing James Alfred Bowley into the city with his mother Keziah, which was the first escape from Maryland. James was 6 when the Fugitive Slave Act passed, and Keziah and her husband and her other children moved to Canada to safety. Harriet kept James there because she wanted him to be educated in the city, and he did. He stayed with her and eventually went to Canada, and then eventually went to Georgetown, South Carolina during Reconstruction, and was a politician, and he was opening schools and segregating universities prior to Jim Crow kicking in. I think that that's a really interesting Philadelphia specific historical event. There's also decisions about, you know, what are you talking about? So if the period of time that Harriet Tubman was operating on the Underground Railroad and staying in Philadelphia, she was quite young, and that in itself, if you're doing a historically specific milestone piece, maybe her age, her young, courageous face is something to explore. And then the flip side of that coin is she is an icon of the ages, and she needs to be a culmination of her life's work. And that's a different sort of conversation to explore. So yeah, I mean, really it's just kind of getting started on some of that. You know, I like that, and two brought it up about General Sherman. You know, I think that evokes images of a different type of statue that maybe competes with those men on horseback that are just facing north on the center of the North Apron. I don't know what the answer is yet, but all of those things need to be taken into consideration, including scale, specific placement in relation to pedestrian traffic, and you know, how the sculpture interrelates with its surroundings. All of those things are important.
So we have 3 other hands raised. We want to try and get their comments or questions in before we run out of time. Go ahead, Sister Malele.
All right, good evening. So I just want to share with everybody that I keep hearing this communication about this is not a typical process and that we're not starting from the beginning. But when I hear that being said, neither did Nana Harriet Tubman. She did not have a typical process in which she had to go forth with bringing herself and others to freedom. And so therefore, that's a moot point that I'm hearing. I feel as if you all in your positions have the right, you all have the will to be able to do so, as well as Wesley, you too can say, I hear what's happening in the community, because this is not something that transpired in the month of June. These conversations started with your office, Kelly Lee and Marguerite, back in April. And we've had Zoom sessions, we've had email exchanges, we've been waiting on minutes from our last email Zoom exchange and things of that nature. So this is not anything new, Wesley, that I want you to know about. What actually brought me to City Hall, as an example, was the Sankofa Artisans Guild, who had on 4 different floors exhibit of quilts from people not only from the Philadelphia area in the state of Pennsylvania, but Virginia, Maryland, all the way out to California. And that again was a call where people were asked to come together to represent Nana Harriet Tubman. And I just feel as if, you know, when it goes to about the statue that I saw secondly, because I came down there first because due to the exhibit, and we love Nana Harriet Tubman. So when we see any imagery of her, when we hear about her, when we learn about her, that's that connection that we have. It's not necessarily every mute small point and component. Yes, it has to do with her structure. So even when I heard the other man say this a little while ago, you can't compare Nana Harriet Tubman as an example to no Rocky statue. That is a fictional character from Hollywood. How do you even speak on those terms is crazy to me. And in relation to tax dollars and however this is being paid for, once again, I think it's a mandate on your office to say, listen, Mary Anderson, yes, it is different. Yes, this is the second time we've asked you to do this, but amongst you all, you need to take the initiative amongst yourselves, regardless of any more polls that will happen in the future, to say, listen, we understand, we are educated enough, we can understand the process needs to happen differently, regardless of how much we and other people say they love, regardless of how many more statistics and data that you get, do better. As my background as an educator too, I know that there was much more engagement, as far as I'm concerned, from the Sankofa Artisan Guild and them communicating with schools who came there weekly, making lesson plans for children who were doing things. In addition to the fact of when I see and hear something about a sculptor who potentially is not from this area, whereas possibly somebody else could be, that means that that person could be somewhere at one of my recreation centers for my children in my community, helping to keep them involved. We have summer youth programming this summer with Work Ready or PYN. Why can't some of those children be involved in an activity? So I feel as if it's very detached. Even the language that you used, Wesley Wofford, and even communicating the names of my ancestors, and you use words like slaves. Those are things that I would never do, even in teaching. We don't talk in those terms. So I know there's this whole thing going around the country right now about critical race theory, et cetera. I feel detached from you even as an artist regarding the artistry that you created, because it doesn't hold foot, because you do not represent. I heard you communicate that speech too about a poem and a poet, when once they feel as if they can't see themselves in. If you can't see yourself in Nana Harriet Tubman, if you don't have that thrive, if that essence, if you close your eyes, whether or not it's a seizure, disability, or whatever the case may be, if you can't draw back into it, then you don't have it. You just don't have it. You have it by way of an art design, but you have to also be more in tune to it. And that's what you're lacking, and you will forever lack that. It's just not a part of you. So you are given this second opportunity, commission sight unseen. That is a disgrace. To still at this point in time to say that you have a date of November 2023 for it to be up and revealed, and we're having this conversation right here on June 15th, that's disgusting. And I expect for you all to do better. If you need to go back to the drawing table and say, start over, do it now. Don't wait until the end of the summer vacations after Juneteenth, get all riled up, red, black, and green. This is not what this is about. This is about my ancestry. This is a process that was not done properly, regardless, Marguerite, regardless, Kelly Lee, if you are all saying, I have the autonomy to be able to do so. It's not right. Challenge yourselves. I had this conversation with you all similarly on the Zoom, and you're not doing it. You're like stuck yourselves in a statue cemented form who can't move. You're not understanding that this is not right. And I too was on the call with you, Stephanie Fuentes. And again, you all need to understand that the process that you are doing can be duplicated again. And it's going to be wrong the second time around too. Take priority. Talk to your mayor even. Don't get so stuck on, oh, this is my title. This is my time. I'm going to do it because I can. This is more than that. And it's letting me know that this is more just about somebody getting a check. That's how it feels at this point. And that is a very detachment. You all, to me, feel very detached from it. It's like you're just trying to go with a timeline, a calendar check, hand out a check. That's how it feels. And there's not just a small amount of people, Wesley Wofford, that I want you to know that feel this way. This has been happening through social media now. There's been on the radio programs, etc. And it's starting to get a little worse, because we're still here on June 15th this evening hearing that this is the typical process. It's not typical, but this is what we can do. I'm ashamed of it. I don't want to feel that with any attachment to Nana Harriet Tubman. And we use words like Nana in front of it as an example because she's not our peer. Or I'll also call her as an example, Mama Harriet Tubman, because she's not some woman who I would just consider, oh, I can just call her by this name. Even that is not, it's unexcusable. But you all literally don't get it. You get checks. That's what you're seeing to me. I see you all each on this screen like right now as if you would represent a dollar sign. You're not understanding the true concept and the mission and the history in the regard of her determination.
Thank you.
Sickening.
Sister, we hear you. We do want to allow the other two with the raised hands to speak before we exit tonight. But does anyone from the panelists want to comment?
Sister Malele, I do want to comment. I appreciate everything that you have said, and I don't disagree with your, where you're coming from. This is not easy. It's a very difficult conversation. But that's what public art is supposed to do. Public art is supposed to allow us to have these conversations, this is a healthy conversation, this dialogue that we're having, the ability for you to, be able to express yourself to us and us to be able to express ourselves back. I mean, honestly, me personally, this project, this Harriet Tubman sculpture is about, for me, it's about healing. It's about healing for this city that is suffering from a lack of representation of women, of Black women who have represented in our public art. And it's about a healing from America not being, intentionally not telling our story. But part of that healing is not just, for me, it's not just, Black artists only telling Black stories. I truly believe we need America to embrace Black stories. We need everyone to embrace Black stories, and we need everyone to understand, our stories. And I feel like, when I saw how emotional people got from this statue, for many reasons, that signaled to me that it was a symbol of healing and a symbol of healing to begin. And I truly believe that it's not just, up to one race to solve all the issues against Black people in this country. It may feel that way because we're being, most of the time it's like we're on our own and we have to solve our own issues. But that's, just like in Nana Harriet's time, she wasn't able to do it alone, and she held hands with people across all different, races to help bring that about. And I'm not saying that this is that, and I'm not saying that this is going to solve, all the issues in our world in terms of, just the racial injustice, to do this. But I'm responding to what you're saying, as if we don't care and we don't have, feeling, and if we're not trying to, better this city. We have dozens of public art, projects that are coming out that you have seen or that you will see that are, all open calls for artists. So this is a unique situation. It is a commission. It is a continuation of the statute that was presented prior. So I hope that lets you know that we're not just, hearing you and not taking it in and not, having the same desire that you have for healing in this city. But thank you for your comments.
Can I add just a few words in the tail end of that? I think that representation matters. We all think that representation matters. And I might joke with Wesley about, him not being recognizable in his work 20 or 30 years down the road. But that's a joke between he and I. I think the issue of equity has mattered throughout this whole process. And the fact that we've gotten to this point where he is the artist, we have to move forward. Have to I say this? Public art is not something you do in a studio by yourself. Every public artist is different, but it involves a process like this. I'm going to repeat myself. Public artists don't work in a bubble. So in this case, he has been chosen as the artist, but the representation part comes from all of you, comes from all of us. It's on all of us to help Wesley get this right. So that's why it's not him alone that's going to be responsible for his work. It's on all of us. And that's why the most critical voices of this project should do all they can to assist Wesley in getting this right. The history of Harriet Tubman is very complex. The history of Philadelphia and its anti-slavery movement is very, very complex. And I know that the majority of the Underground Railroad, the history of the Underground Railroad, we know that it was Blacks helping Blacks. And it's Blacks benefiting from that, right, from that relationship. But here in Philadelphia, we've had hundreds of years of history. You know, the earliest anti-slavery document came from Germantown. It came from a man named Pastorius, one of the early founding families in Germantown, and he was Dutch German, and it was through the Society of Friends, and it was a petition against slavery in 1688. 1688, a French Huguenot, Anthony Benezet, in 1858, he persuaded all the Quakers to finally put their foot down and make a stance about anti-slavery. That was in 1758. So there are many pieces here that we're not seeing. And Harriet Tubman, when she arrived in Philadelphia, she met an extraordinary number of people, including Lucretia Mott, who was a Quaker abolitionist who's buried at Fair Hill Cemetery in North Philadelphia. And she was white. So she had friends everywhere. Frederick Douglass, but also Susan B. Anthony. And they did this together. You know, before the Civil War happened, you had over 100 years of activism here in Philadelphia. So there's a story here that needs to be told correctly. So I ask all the historians out there, I ask all the folks who are most critical of this process to lend your voices, lend your hand. This is the first part of it, but it needs to be, we need to advance this story. We need to help Wesley advance this story. I think he has a skill set for this. You know, I joke around about him, but I think he most definitely has a skill set for this. About 4 million people have seen his work and have loved his work. But we cannot just cancel him out, you know, dismiss him because of the color of his skin. And I've been an advocate for the arts, for artists, for representation of the arts for almost 30 years. And so I understand where this is coming from, and I appreciate it, and I believe in it. But at this point, because of the complexities of the public art process, representation comes from all of us here, comes from all of you, all of Philadelphians, to make sure that Wesley gets this right. It's not just on him. He is perhaps the most critical part of this. He's the creative part of this. He is the vessel, as he has described himself, as any artist would be. But because this is a public art process, we all have a say in how he presents his work, because eventually it's our work. Harriet Tubman's history doesn't belong just to African Americans. African American history belongs to America. And if we continue to talk about African American history in the bubble of just for African Americans, then we're missing something here. We have to challenge ourselves to include more people in this conversation. And I don't think, anyway.
No, too, your comments are spot on. And, you know, this, you know, the majority of this conversation, you know, I'm glad that we're having it, because I think, Wesley, you sort of said it in the very beginning, it's the elephant in the room, right? You're a white male artist from the South, no less, that, you know, that we have hired to do the permanent statue because of the temporary one that you've done. And, you know, to echo what Marguerite said, it's not as if we don't understand the importance. It's not as if we are not getting it. But I think where we are right now is that we want to make sure that it is done really well. And where it's 7:29, I know we have 2 hands raised. I think we have time for one more comment because there's a lot of sort of next steps that we want to get to, and we want to respect everyone's time. So Stephanie, do you want to call on the next person?
Yes, go ahead, Michelle. Michelle. I see that they unmuted themselves. Michelle, do you hear us? Oh, there you go. Feel free to share your comment or ask your question.
Michelle, now it looks like you are muted. Yeah. Michelle, you might be having technical difficulty. And while that's working on Stephanie, do you want to, there are 3 other hands raised. Do you want to call on someone else for right now?
I'm going to call.
Okay, I think
I can hear you.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Great. I had a very quick comment, and this is firstly for the artist. If he wishes to, be supportive of this conversation that we've had, then one thing he can do very clearly is resign his commission and allow the process to begin anew. But because from the very beginning, we've heard that this is already a fait accompli, I'm confused about why we're even having this conversation. It feels like a closed process, and we were just invited just to shut us up. I'm frustrated, confused, and quite frankly, a bit angry about all of this. And I don't expect an explanation, but it would be great to have one. And I'm really disappointed in the women who led this whole charge. I'm very disappointed. And that is pretty much all I had to say.
Okay. Michelle, the point of this particular meeting was to start to get input on what we want Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman message to be. We sort of introduced 3 very broad themes just based on her history that we want to input on. As part of our next steps, we're going to be having a broader survey tool in order to get input from citywide from Philadelphians in order to help us narrow down what this message of Philadelphia's Harriet Tubman statue will be. The point of this meeting wasn't to discuss who the artist would be, but what Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman's message would be. And it just, again, the beginning of those conversations. So in terms of next steps, because that is a nice segue. Like I said, we're going to be creating this survey tool that will be on the website, that will be a public input poll. And we encourage everyone on this call to, even if you participated in these discussions, to also participate in that and share it with friends. We'll be doing a lot of promotion, just like we promoted the temporary Harriet Tubman statue. We will be promoting this tool in order to get as much input and as many participants to give their input on the front end as possible. The survey tool will be available on creativephl.org from Wednesday, June 22nd. It will be live through July 13th. We will also have it on Arts Access TV. At the end of the July 13th date, we're going to compile all of the answers from the survey tool. We'll be sharing that with Wesley, the advisory committee that Marguerite spoke of. And then also we will provide that information on creativephl.org. The public input, again, will help to determine the theme and the development of Philadelphia's permanent Harriet Tubman statue. Everyone who registered for this session will be invited to future and ongoing engagements, especially as this permanent statute starts to take shape. And as I mentioned before, we will continue to do programming around Harriet Tubman to keep the interest in the statue going. And then also the history of Harriet Tubman and all that she has done. Any additional questions or comments about the permanent statue can be sent to arts@phila.gov. But again, the website is creativephl.org starting on June 22nd in order to participate in the forum. And with that, I want to thank everyone for logging on tonight and participating in this conversation. I think that, the conversations around the process are as important to us as the conversation around what the theme will be. We hope that everyone will work with us to work with Wesley in order to develop a Harriet Tubman statue that we are all proud of. We hear you. We know that some of you are disappointed in the process, but I hope that you will continue to work with us. And with that, I'm going to thank you again and wish everyone a good evening.